is an episode of How to Analyse Poetry from the Learning Cauldron. Today we'll be looking at Liz Lochhead's poem, The Bargain. Analysing poetry involves identifying and dissecting the literary techniques that the poet has used effectively to explore the theme or themes of a poem. In her poem, The Bargain, Liz Lochhead explores the themes of relationships, change, and Scottish, specifically Glaswegian, culture. A quick heads up before we start. As you'll be aware, this poem is far longer than the 5 other set Lochhead poems, so to avoid boring you all to death, we've had to go into less detail, but be sure to look at the notes on screen. The title of the poem, The Bargain, is deliberately ambiguous. It refers to the negotiation process, the haggling that goes on at the flea market where this is set, but also the process of compromise that is found in any relationship. The poem starts with a reference to the river, which is the River Clyde, and there are also specific references to the Barrows, the Tron end of London Road and Gallowgate, all places in Glasgow in Scotland. That's the setting in place. The setting in time is January, and that's at the start of the year when perhaps we're at a crossroads in life, just as this relationship seems to be at a crossroads, the one mentioned in the poem. The use of second person and first person voice in the second line, you and I, establishes the relationship and the fact that the persona in the poem is addressing her lover. Note too that the first 2 lines rhyme, hi and I. There isn't a lot of rhyme in this poem, it's mainly free-flowing, but those are to be noted. The use of sound is very, very effective throughout this whole poem, and here's the first instance, twitch and fret at the Tron end. So we've got a rather harsh staccato sounding T consonance, which creates a feeling of unease. The alliterative 330 creates a sound of friction here, emphasising the fact that the fans are annoyed with each other, and the word choice of wrong here again adds to the sense of unease. Word choice of ugly losers creates a sense of intimidating human beings, and let fly suggests violence. This would be sectarian violence, presumably between Rangers and Celtic, the 2 football teams who are arch rivals in Glasgow. The reference to 2 rivers is an interesting one. It's ambiguous because this could be the 2 rivers, the Clyde and the Kelvin in Glasgow. It could be the 2 streams of football fans, or it could be one massed stream of fans meeting the Clyde River. But an interesting visual picture created there. And this emphasises the idea of being at a crossroads in life. If stanza 1 is descriptive, stanza 2 is definitely more reflective in tone. In the first line, we have another reference to January, reminding us of this crossroads moment. There's a reference also to we, the first person plural voice here, establishing that we're talking about a couple. And there's enjolment introducing the repetitive looking back, looking forward. This emphasises the idea of uncertainty, and there's certainly a more uncertain tone here, which is again emphasised by the fact that there's further enjolment leading us on to stanza 3. In stanza 3, the use of both sound and structure comes into its own. We've got the alliterative bees in but, boy, beautiful bakelite bush, etc. We've got the softer meadows mini market, and we've got the peas in button popping, station hopping. Listen to the rhythm of that. In the final line, sound is used effectively again with changing tune, emphasising the theme of change which runs throughout this poem. The thing to note in this paragraph is the lack of punctuation, and this helps to keep the narrative flowing, evoking the busyness of the scene and the fact that the memories are coming flooding back. Stanza 4 starts with an interesting comment. Today we're in love. And the reference, the word choice of today, suggests that that's not always the case and that perhaps they won't be tomorrow and maybe they weren't yesterday. So there's a slight doubt creeping in here, and that is accentuated by the use of the question. There's uncertainty. Lochhead then looks at the essential essence of Glasgow, using the word choice of splintering, which is suggesting separation or division, and that's appropriate for a poem which is also at the same time looking at the potential breakup of a relationship. Notice the sound, sibilance here and assonance here, and particularly the brazen black alliteration, Victorian heart. And in a poem which is in some ways a love poem about the city and about her own relationship, it's interesting to have the word choice of black, which can symbolise evil, yet the word choice of brazen seems to counteract that. She almost has an admiration for its gutsiness as a city. And she says, so what if every other tenement wears its hearth on its gable end? And this shows that despite its downsides, she still loves Glasgow. And this is a fabulous play on words here, wears its hearth on its gable end. If you've seen a tenement block where part of the building has been demolished, you'll see the hearth at the end of the building. But this is also a play on words with to wear your heart on your sleeve, which is when you're showing your emotions. So very clever play on words. And another question, the uncertainty comes to the fore yet again. The tone then becomes distinctly wistful as the persona says that all she wants is my glad eye to catch a glint in your flinty northern northern face again. Listen to the sound here, the assonant short I sound and the internal rhyme, which results from it with glint and flinty, emphasises the contrast between perhaps the glint of connection they first had and now the way she perceives his look, which like flint is cold, hard and sharp. The word choice of just once here emphasises her longing for things to be the way they were. The use of oh here continues the conversational tone first established with yes at the beginning of the stanza, and the enjolment from cold and coming down emphasises the fact that both the temperature of the setting where they are at the Barrows is decreasing, and perhaps also the fact that their relationship is cooling. The use of sound once again comes to the fore with the N's in no, we never lingered long among, and also the L's in there, which helps to draw this line out. This emphasises the negative tone in this line. The stanza culminates with a sensory overload, in this case the sense of smell and touch. Stank is a very strong word choice, almost creating a tone of revulsion here. The smell at the market on this damp day is very unpleasant, and the imagery and the word choice of wet dog reek, emphasised by reek rising, a bit of alliteration there, all combine to create a very vivid sensory picture of the scene. The characters at the Barrows are very vividly described, and here's one. He confesses that he's steamboats, adding a slightly humorous touch because he has partaken of too much of the falling down water, sweet, warm wine. And if you hear the sibilants throughout, this creates a sense of slurred speech here. Squat really lets us see the poverty that people in this area live in. He's in a puddle with nothing to sell, and while his list of items is slightly humorous, it's also very, very depressing. Bent forks, a torn calendar, and the use of parenthesis here to emphasise last year's and therefore useless, and broken, the word choice here again, shows us that he is unlikely to be earning any money from his sales. In the middle of this stanza there is a short, blunt sentence. So we hadn't the stomach for it today. The we refers to herself and her partner, and hadn't the stomach for it is ambiguous in that it could mean their relationship or just going to the market. And the word choice of today harks back to the previous reference, showing that their situation can change on a daily basis. We don't deserve a bargain then suggests that perhaps we won't be able to make the compromises necessary to continue the relationship, and it sounds self-critical as well. Moving on, the alliteration of C's in the next couple of lines adds a short staccato k sound, and it sounds fussy like the scrupulous, suggesting here that you can't have perfection in life, you've got to compromise. As the stanza concludes, there's the use of a list with alliteration of B's to emphasise the different sorts of things that one can buy, and a reference to dirt cheap antiques, or real ones, who knows, among the rags and drunks, and the reference to drunks here suggests the blunt reality of life in a working class area of a city such as Glasgow. In the final line there's more figurative language, the use of the phrase take to the cleaners, which suggests that you're conning someone, taking advantage perhaps of someone who is inebriated. And this also links with dirt cheap earlier on, and it suggests that perhaps there might be a treasure hidden there if it's worth persisting to find it. Stanza 6 opens with further figurative language, and again ambiguous, has its price. This can literally mean that everything for sale at the Barrows does have a price attached to it, but at the same time we sense that it's also referring to the fact that in a relationship there needs to be compromise and that people make sacrifices. No haggling in the next line again backs up this idea of no compromise and people not prepared to give. There's a slight humorous quality here to the use of pure utility, highlighted with the use of the capitals, when the young man selling radios is telling them how useful they are. Pure is very much Glasgow slang for very. There's a contrast in language here where we start with more formal register, 50s are fashionable and decade of Art Deco, and then descend to very much vernacular colloquial language, pay through your nose for. Again, the use of sound is particularly effective here with the lovely swapping around of the F's and G's in fiberglass is flabbergasted, and there's a humour here. We can see that the man selling it is particularly astonished by the bargain, referring to the title, that he offers the persona and her partner. As we approach the end of the stanza, the word choice of struggling is very poignant, referring to the poverty in Glasgow, and the picture of a father carrying a hearth home. Home is supposed to be where the heart is, and the hearth is the heart part of a family home, suggesting that he's trying to build a home for his family, but that it's difficult. Finally, the last two lines, very impactful. All the couples we know fall apart or have kids. Short, blunt sentence, suggesting there are only two options. If you want to stay together, kids are the only thing that will keep you together. Hinting again at the uncertainty that the persona feels about the relationship. Stanza 7 opens in a conversational tone once more with O, and then we're reminded of the couple, weave and wheel, but points out that they've never taken on much responsibility. They've simply bought objects, icons, for their home, and these have to be portable so that they're easily removed if things break down. The use of parenthesis here emphasises the importance of that fact. Note that the list has no punctuation, and they are interesting and random objects. A dartboard, sharp, spiky, and a peacock feather, something for show. In stanza 8, the strong sense of place is continued through the use of vivid imagery and sound. We queue in a blue haze of hot fat for Danny's donuts that grit our teeth with granules of sugar. Very powerful sound here. And also the idea of grit our teeth is ambiguous because it could mean gritting our teeth literally, but also it could be the idea that they are having to grit their teeth to get through the difficult points in their relationship. Haze here, the word choice, or imagery in fact, suggests the idea of confusion, and she is feeling a little bit perplexed about where they are in their relationship. That is also emphasised by the use of enjambment here. I keep losing you and finding you, both in the literal sense, she can't see him where he is on the next stall perhaps, and then she spots him again, but also the fact that in their relationship she feels she's lost him, but then they seem to come close again. The use of sound is also effective here in thumb, through, and then 30s, which conveys the idea of movement as he thumbs through these manuals. As we approach the middle of stanza 8, there's a slight Aladdin moment as the persona rubs her sleeve on an unpromising looking rusty Chinese saucer. She's hoping to see something valuable underneath and perhaps gold, but what she finds is gilt, which may be the colour of gold but isn't actually. There's also the potential of a play on words here with gilt, G-U-I-L-T. The persona continues to address her lover in a conversational tone with the O, and then talks about we promised we'd not let our affection for the slightly cracked trap us. Now, the references here to slightly cracked are interesting. The word choice suggests literally cracked crockery that they might be looking at, but also maybe suggests that there's a slight imperfection in their relationship and maybe a division occurring. And the word choice of trap is even stronger. That is not something one would want in a relationship, to feel trapped. She continues that even if it is a bargain, harking back to the title of the poem, we won't buy. And this has overtones of perhaps the relationship being doomed. There's another cameo performance here by one of the stallholders who says that they will be the death of her. This is obviously hyperbolic, they won't literally be, but it definitely adds to the negative feel here. And the use of the C here is very much the Glasgow vernacular, and lovely bit of alliteration, it's been the doldrums, the day, emphasising with a harsh D sound the tough life of the stallholders out in the cold every day. The day is Scots for today, adding to the established sense of place in the Barrows in Glasgow. Moving on to stanza 9, the penultimate stanza of the poem, the phrase packing up time is well worth looking at. It's packing up time for the stallholders as they go home at the end of the market, but there's also just a hint that she's wondering whether it's time for them to stop their relationship, for it to come to an end. The word choice of dark adds to this because it establishes a mood which is perhaps more sombre, and this is added to once again by the imagery, the simile as cold as the river. The repetition of river here brings us back to earlier in the poem, and also we've got the idea of a cooling down in the relationship. It's interesting to note the difference between the items that the persona and her partner have bought. This is accentuated by the use of sound, the harsh B sound when describing the things that the persona herself has bought, and then a sibilant S sound, much softer, for the list of items bought by her partner. In each case, they have bought something defective or imperfect, a broken catch on the box that she's bought, which is only maybe rosewood, or a waistcoat that needs a stitch it just won't get, a feeling of almost almost inevitability and hopelessness there. And the name of the book is interesting, emphasised by the enjambment, Inquire Within Upon Everything. It suggests that there's uncertainty in their relationship and that they're seeking answers and looking inward to analyse the relationship. The final stanza of the poem is short, thank heavens, you say. The motif of cold is mentioned here, and that's emphasised by the repetition, cold air, and also the use of a short, blunt sentence here. It could refer to the actual weather conditions. Pathetic fallacy is also at play here because it could also refer to their feelings for each other. The word choice of doesn't, again, has this tone of negativity about it, and the we refers to the persona herself and her partner, and they're facing an option. They can either be reconciled, mend things, or they can learn to throw things away. And it seems rather negative ending on the throw them away, but there is slight hope because of the fact that we know they are prepared to tolerate imperfection. So there's a sense of finality here that is emphasised by the repeated th sound, and yet perhaps all is not lost. Form and structure. There are 10 stanzas of varying lengths. There's a rhyming couplet at the start, but most of this poem is free verse, which adds to the spontaneity of the recollections as she thinks about their day at the Barrows. The last stanza has an A-B-C-B structure, which helps to add to the finality of it. The tone varies as the poem progresses, ranging between reflective, faintly humorous, negative, wistful, conversational, and uncertain. I hope that's been helpful. See you next time. In other videos, we analyse more of Liz Lochhead's poems. If you found this or any of our other videos useful, it would be great if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for your support.